الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا المرسلين. Respected listeners, today we completed the recitation of Surah Al-Hud and recited Surah Yusuf and also parts of Surah Al-Ra'd. In Surah Al-Hud, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about the Anbiya alayhi salatu wasalam. Today's recitation began with the story of Sayyidina Hud alayhi salatu wasalam. He sent to their brother Hud, to the people of Ad, their brother Hud. Sayyidina Hud alayhi salatu wasalam said to his people, "My people, worship Allah, there is no God other than Him, and I do not ask of any wage from you. My reward is with Allah who created me." But they refused, and Allah speaks about their refusal, their rebellion, and then Allah speaks about their punishment. Then Allah speaks the same about Sayyidina Salih alayhi salatu wasalam, what he said to his people, and what would they say to him? قالوا يا صالح قد كنت فينا مرجوا قبل هذا. They would say that, "O Salih, we had hope in you before this." Meaning, before you began talking about this message of this prophethood, we had hoped that you would become something. And what happened? You turned out to be this guy. So Allah speaks about how He called out to them, and then He showed them a sign, the sign of the camel. But then they refused. In the end, they killed the camel which Allah had sent down. So then Allah sent down His punishments. Then Allah mentions the story of Sayyidina Shu'aib alayhi salatu wasalam, the people of Midyan. And again, they would fiddle with the scales of weighing, and when they would measure when buying and selling. So Allah speaks about this, and Sayyidina Shu'aib alayhi salatu wasalam would warn them against this. And again, they would say similar things to him as well. And Allah speaks about how they were punished also. And then Allah speaks about Sayyidina Musa alayhi salatu wasalam. So in between as well, before Sayyidina Shu'aib alayhi salatu wasalam, Allah mentions the story of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam. Allah says, وَلَقَدْ جَاءَتْ رُسُلُنَا إِبْرَاهِيمَ بِالْبُشْرَى قَالُوا سَلَامًا. Our messengers, meaning our angels, came to Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam with good news. And they said salam, meaning said they greeted him. So he greeted them back, and he didn't know who they were. They were angels that were sent, but then he didn't know who they were. He just entertained them as guests. So then he brought them a cooked meal to eat, but they wouldn't eat. Being angels, they wouldn't eat. So Allah says, فَلَمَّا رَأَى أَيْدِيَهُمْ لَا تَصِلُ إِلَيْهِ نَكِرَهُمْ وَأَوْجَسَ مِنْهُمْ خِيفَةً. When he saw their hands not going towards the food, he became wary of them, and he sensed fear from them. So they said, "لَا تَخَفْ إِنَّا أُرْسِلْنَا إِلَىٰ قَوْمِ لُوطٍ." Do not fear, we have been sent to the people of Lut alayhi salatu wasalam. I mentioned the other day as well, Sayyidina Lut alayhi salatu wasalam was a nephew of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam. So what happened was, these angels, before going to carry out the punishment on the people of Lut alayhi salatu wasalam, they visited Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam first. And they visited him to give his wife glad tidings of a child. And Allah mentions this as well, that وَبَشَّرْنَاهَا بِإِسْحَاقَ, that we gave her the glad tidings of Ishaq. After many years, and in old age, Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam was blessed with Ishaq as a child. And then how they were amazed at how at such an old age would she be able to bear a child. But they said, no, this is the order of Allah and the instruction of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, I mentioned this once talked previously that to understand the Quran, one has to not only have a grasp and understanding of the Arabic language, but often the cultures and the traditions of the people in relation to whom those verses were revealed. So here, for example, Allah says, it's a beautiful example, Allah says that we sent our messengers, meaning our angels, to Ibrahim a.s. with good news. And he said salam, they said salam to him, meaning they said a word of greeting. And he replied with salam as well. And then he bought some food. But then when he placed the food in front of them, they wouldn't eat. So then the Quran says that he became fearful. I mean, Ibrahim a.s. became fearful. Now, if someone was to offer us food and we was to say no, it's okay, we wouldn't become fearful of that person. So what does this mean? Why did Ibrahim become fearful of these people? The reason being is that in their culture, and this carries on as well in many of our cultures as well, that when you offer somebody food and they eat your food, then they won't harm you. They cannot mean you bad. And if they do, then that would be a big transgression. And a good example of this is, you know, parents often they say to their children, you may have heard the term in Urdu, namak haram. Namak haram means salt. And namak haram means that you eat my salt and then you disobey me. Meaning you eat my food and then you disobey me. So when parents say to their children, you live under the same roof as me. You eat the food I put on the table, what do you do? Disobey me. How disobedient could you be? How much of an enemy could you be? So Ibrahim a.s., when he presented the food to them and they wouldn't eat the food, he thought it's possible that they're not eating the food because they want to harm me. Because once they eat my food, they can't harm me, because they've eaten the food that I've presented to them. So because of this, he became fearful. So this is what this means. But again, an understanding of their culture and nutrition. And this is the kind of culture you get in tribal cultures and villages and so on. So, but then Allah speaks about how the angels said that no, we've come, we're angels, or we've been sent to the people of Lut alayhi salatu wasalam. And then after this, Allah speaks about the punishment of the people of Lut alayhi salatu wasalam. Allah mentions how, with the flip of a wing, how they were completely turned over and the whole nation was destroyed. Then Sayyidina Musa alayhi salatu wasalam is mentioned, and then we finish the surah. We then recite the Surah to Yusuf. Surah to Yusuf is a Meccan surah, and some of the verses, however, are Madani. Surah to Yusuf, Allah Himself says in the Quran, نَحْنُ نَقُصُّ عَلَيْكَ أَحْسَنَ الْقَصَصِ, we relate unto you the best or the most beautiful of all stories. It has been known as the most beautiful of stories, the story of Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam. However, far from being a love story, far from being an entertaining story, it is a story of sacrifice, immense sacrifice, and devotion to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sayyidina Salman al-Farsi radiyallahu anhu, after the Prophet passed away, he was once invited to an area to speak to the people. So when he came, people had gathered from all around the city because they were excited that Salman, the companion of the Prophet, Salman al-Farsi, he lived very long, 300 years or so. He lived for a long time, concentrated. And his story doesn't only, he's famous for the story of the Battle of Ahzab, but even much longer before then, his search for the truth, his going into slavery and so many other things. So he lived a long life even before the Prophet ﷺ, before meeting the Prophet ﷺ, even after. So he was once invited, and people had flocked from all over the city to come and listen to him speak. So he came, he sat down, and the whole masjid was full of people. And what did he do? He sat down and then he began reciting Surah Yusuf. Just began reciting Surah Yusuf. And the people, they were waiting for him to tell them stories of how he went with the Prophet here, and how the Sahaba did this and they did that. They were looking for a roller coaster of entertaining stories, but he just came and sat down and began reciting Surah Yusuf. Slowly, they began all getting up and leaving. And then there was only a handful of people left in the masjid, and then he said to them, he turned around and says, what was it? Embellished speech that you were looking for? You were looking for entertainment? Is that what you were looking for? I recite to you what Allah calls the most beautiful story in the Quran, and then people walk away. So this surah is a beautiful, not only is the story beautiful, but even the recitation, the verses, and I'll just paraphrase and loosely translate it because the story is mentioned in detail. So Yusuf is mentioned in other parts of the Quran, but only here is his story mentioned. So you get, for example, Hud, Saleh, and the other Anbiya, their stories are mentioned briefly in a few places. Sayyidina Yusuf's story is mentioned once, but in detail. In Surah Yusuf, his name is mentioned elsewhere, but his stories are mentioned. Allah says that when Yusuf said to his father, "Oh my father, I saw 11 stars and the sun and the moon prostrating before me in a dream." So his father said, "Look, don't tell your brothers about your dream, lest they hatch a plot against you." Sayyidina Yusuf had an amazing relationship with Sayyidina Yusuf, and he had that extra love for Sayyidina Yusuf, and his brothers were jealous of this already. So when he saw this dream, he told his father being a prophet of Allah, knew that this dream had a very deep meaning. He told Yusuf, "Don't tell them, yeah? They're already not happy with you. If you tell them this now, they're going to start saying, well, look, he sees dreams as well." So, but Yusuf being a child, he ended up telling his brothers. When his brothers heard, they were really angry. So, you know what, let's go finish him off. We've had enough of him. So they began plotting together. So first they said that, look, let's kill him. Then one of the brothers said, look, won't kill him, we'll just abandon him some way. So they asked their father if Yusuf could come out with them to play. The father said, look, I'm not comfortable, what if you leave him? He was young, so, the older brothers would be playing their kinds of games. They said if you leave him on the side and something was to happen to him. So, but the brother said, look, we're all his brothers, and how can anything happen when we're there? In any case, father, he finally agreed. So then they went, and they didn't just leave him, or they actually hit him, really abused him. And then they dropped him into a well, and then they took off his shirt and returned home to their father, and they said, you know what you said was true. We left him with our bags and the wolf devoured him. The Sayyidina Yaqub knew that there was something wrong. The shirt hadn't been torn, it had just been dipped in the blood of a sheep of some sort. And the father said, I will remain patient. Sayyidina Yusuf was stuck in this well. In this well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also revealed to him some of his signs, and Allah says here as well, that you will tell your brothers about this one day. What they've done to you, don't worry Yusuf, you will tell them. Allah protected Sayyidina Yusuf in the well. A caravan was passing by and they went to draw water from the well. Sayyidina Yusuf went, he saw some movement, he jumped into the bucket and they lifted him up in this car. He was very handsome. Yusuf was very handsome. And so they took him back to Egypt with them. Banu Israel actually, the Meccans, when they told Banu Israel about Prophet, Banu Israel said to them, look, ask him a few questions to find out whether he's a true prophet or not. And one of the questions was that if Banu Israel were in Syria and Palestine, in that area, how did they end up in Egypt? So then Surah Yusuf was revealed, because that explains how they came from Canaan and Palestine, in that area, to Egypt. So anyway, he was sold in the market to the Wazir of Egypt. Wazir told his wife to look after him, that we could possibly adopt him as a child. Yusuf grew up in the house of the Wazir. The Wazir's wife fell in love with Sayyidina Yusuf, and she tried to invite him to sing, and Allah mentions this here. Sayyidina Yusuf, destined to be a prophet of Allah, refused to indulge, and at one point she chased him, and all of a sudden they came upon her husband and his master. So rather than admitting that she was at fault, she immediately turned the tables and said to her master, look, Yusuf's trying to seduce me. So, and then they tested to see, well, where was his shirt ripped from? Was it from the front to the back? If the shirt was ripped from the front, then he's guilty. If the shirt was ripped from the back, then she would be guilty. In the end, they found the shirt ripped from the back. They knew that she was guilty, but the Aziz understood what had happened. He said to Yusuf that, Yusuf, don't say to anybody, don't mention this to anybody. If anybody hears, it will be a lot of embarrassment for me. In any case, Yusuf, the women of the city, they began hearing about that the Aziz's wife had fallen in love with her servant, with her slave. So they began gossiping about him. And then she invited them. She said, you gossip about him? I'll show you who he is. So she invited all her friends over for a meal. She gave them all a knife and a fruit to cut. And just when they were about to cut the fruit, she asked Yusuf to walk in. When Yusuf walked in, they all saw him and they all cut their fingers in awe and amazement at the handsomeness and beauty of Sayyidina Yusuf. So then Aziz's wife said, this is the man we were talking about that I've fallen in love with. And I will invite him, and if he doesn't accept, then he'll end up going to prison. They had the power, she had the power being the Aziz's wife. Sayyidina Yusuf prayed that, oh Allah, protect me from sin, and I'd rather go to and languish in prison. And Allah accepted his prayer. And he was saved from the fitna of the women, because what had happened is these women began talking to Yusuf, and they said to Yusuf, Yusuf, why don't you oblige and why don't you listen to her? She's an honourable, noble woman. Sayyidina Yusuf said that this plot of theirs became too burdensome for me, so I prayed to Allah, even prison is better for me than this. So Rasulullah says in the hadith, may Allah have mercy on Sayyidina Yusuf. If he asked to be saved, Allah would have saved him. But he asked for prison. So Allah accepted his prayer, and he languished in prison for many years. Now his staying in a prison wasn't just a normal prison. Not like HMP and St. Green. These were dungeons. These were dungeons and very difficult conditions people stayed in and languished. So, but he stayed here. Then Allah speaks about in the prison, two men came to him. They had seen a dream each. One saw a dream that he was squeezing wine out of grapes, and another one saw that he had put some bread onto his head and birds were eating from there. So they said to Yusuf that you look like a good person. What do these dreams mean? So Allah speaks about how Yusuf had been given the understanding of how to interpret dreams. So he told them that, look, I'll tell you what the meaning of the dreams are. But then he used this as an opportunity to call them towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he told them the meanings of their dreams. He said to the one who was extracting wine, he said he had basically been imprisoned as part of a conspiracy to assassinate the king. But he was innocent, he wasn't involved. So Yusuf ﷺ said to him that your innocence will be proven and you will be freed, and not only will you be freed, but you will be restored to duty and you go back to being the wine bearer of the king. And for the other one, he said you will be found guilty and you will be put to death, and then birds will eat from your corpse. So this happened exactly as Sayyidina Yusuf ﷺ had interpreted. This is exactly what happened. And the man who was free, I mean the wine bearer, Sayyidina Yusuf ﷺ said that, look, when you leave from here, don't forget me. I'm innocent. I'm rotting away in prison, innocent. So remember me in front of the king. This man, he was restored to duty, but he forgot about Yusuf ﷺ. Forgot about him completely. So Yusuf ﷺ, Allah says, فَلَبِثَ فِي السِّجْنِ بِضْعَ سِنِينَ, so he remained in prison for many years. And one day the king saw a dream. He saw 7 fat white cows being devoured by 7 lean cows, and then 7 green ears of corn, and then 7 withered ears of corn. So it was a very strange dream. So he asked his courtiers, what is the meaning of this dream? So they said, look, these are just things people come up with. Not all dreams have any substance behind them. But then that wine bearer was there. He said, wait a minute, I know somebody who can tell you the meaning of this dream. So he said, okay. So he went to the prison and found Yusuf and the Quran says beautifully, how you call that Yusuf alayhi as-Siddiq, Yusuf, oh the truthful one, tell us the meaning of this dream. So then he told him the dream, and then Yusuf ﷺ said that the meaning of this dream is that you will have 7 years of goodness and flourishing crops and food, and that will be followed by 7 years of famine. So you need to make sure you prepare for the 7 years of famine. So when the wine bearer came back and he told Sayyidina Yusuf ﷺ, the king, about the dream, the king said, bring him to me. Let me see who this man is. So then the wine bearer went back to the prison and said to Yusuf ﷺ, the king is calling you. Yusuf ﷺ said, no. Reopen my case and let everyone come back. And I won't leave here until I've been proven innocent. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says in the hadith, may Allah have mercy on Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salatu, if I was in his place, I would have accepted him and run out of the prison. Yusuf alayhi salatu, so with patience, he said, no, I'm not going to leave prison. First, open my case, and then after I've proven my innocence, I'll leave as an innocent man. So then his case was reopened, and the wife of the Aziz was brought. Her name was Zulaykha. She, remember, she had fallen in love with Sayyidina Yusuf ﷺ. And the fact that Yusuf ﷺ was in prison for all of these years, that really hurt her as well emotionally. That somebody she had loved was now languishing in prison because of her. So then she said, look, now the truth has become clear. I was the one who invited him to sin, and he was untruthful. So in this way, Sayyidina Yusuf ﷺ was able to leave the prison as an innocent man. In any case, he advised the king that, look, you need to prepare for these 7 years of famine. And he asked the king that, put me in charge of the warehouses. I'll make sure, because the people that you've got, they will look after themselves and you will suffer at the end. Put me in charge and I'll make sure a good job's done. So Yusuf was put in charge. he began storing in the warehouses in preparation for the 7 years of famine. And as he predicted and as he had interpreted, this is what happened. 7 good years were followed by 7 years of famine. People from all around came to take food during the years of famine from this. Now, then Yusuf had actually been promoted to king. He became the king after this. And people had heard about a very generous and noble king, so they would come from far away to collect food from him during the years of famine. Now, Yaqub in Canaan with his sons, they had also suffered the famine, so he sent his sons and said, look, you go and bring some food back. So when they went, Sayyidina Yusuf recognized them. They didn't recognize him, he was small, but he recognized them. So he thought, what can I do? So what he did is, he said to them, he pretended to treat them as spies and says, you've come to spy on me. So they said, no. So he said, how many brothers have you got? So they said, we've got one more brother, he's at home. He says, why did you bring him? He says, but our father wouldn't let him. He said, look, next time if you don't bring him, I'm not going to give you any food. And he sent them off. He gave them food, he sent them off, and he put their money back into their bags. They didn't know what they were back. So when they got home, they told their father, look, if we go again, we have to take Binyamin, the other son, with us, the other brother with us. So the father said, you remember what you did last time? Last time I sent his brother with you, what happened? He died. In any case, the next time he came around for them needing food, they had to take Binyamin again. They had to plead with him, with their father, and they took Binyamin with them. When they entered into the city, the father told them to enter from separate doors because they had all been blessed with beauty. They went, and then when they went to the king, he took Binyamin to the side. Yusuf took Binyamin, and he said, Binyamin, I'm your brother Yusuf. And then he made a plan to keep Binyamin with him. So then when it was time for them to go, he hid one of his cups into Binyamin's bag. And when they were going, somebody called out that somebody had stolen the king's golden cup. So they called them back. And they said, look, we're not thieves. So just search their bags. And then he said to them, what's the punishment then? If you are caught out to be thieves, what's the punishment? So look, if any one of us has stolen from me, they'll become your servant, your slave. That was the punishment at the time. So they opened all their bags, they opened Binyamin's at the end, and they found a cup inside there. So then they said, look, Binyamin has to stay. So they begged the king and they said, look, not him. If he doesn't come home, that's when he kills us. He's got to come home with us. So, but he said, no, nobody can take his place. How can I punish somebody else instead of him? So they had to leave. Now, one of the brothers, say his name was Yehuda, he was the one who initially had given the suggestion not to kill Yusuf, but to abandon him somewhere. He said, I'm not going back. I can't face that like this. So he refused to go back. And when the brothers got back, they told their father, look, this is what's happened. And their father had lost now 3 of his children. So he said, look, now go back and bring all my children back. And he had become blind out of crying. So Yaqub had become blind out of crying for this missing Yusuf. So in any case, when they reached back, they said to Yusuf, look Yusuf, and then they pleaded with him, look, so much has happened and our father is suffering now because of this. Please let's take our brothers back. So then Yusuf says, do you remember what you did to Yusuf when he was young? And they thought to themselves, nobody knows about this. Only we know. I'm Yusuf. He says, are you Yusuf? Are you Yusuf? He said, yes, I'm Yusuf. And this Binyamin is my brother. Allah has showed His mercy on us. And then he said, and then they asked for forgiveness, but he said, La tathriba alaykum al-yawm, there is nothing on you today. And he forgave them. And this is the same thing the Prophet said when he went to Makkah, La tathriba alaykum al-yawm, no fault on you today. In any case, then he said to his brothers, go back to Canaan and bring everybody back. My father, everybody, bring everybody. So then they went, and then he said, take this shirt of mine, and then when you reach home, throw it on my father's face. His sight will return. When the caravan turned away from Misr, traveling towards Canaan, Sayyidina Yaqub said, I can smell Yusuf. The people around him said, look, you're still stuck in your old ways. So then when the caravan came, they threw the shirt of Yusuf on Yaqub's face. His sight returned, and he said, I told you I know more than you know. And then they all returned to Egypt. So this is how all of Banu Israel came to Egypt. And then Sayyidina Yusuf, he was there, sat on his throne, and then everyone, his brothers and everyone's frustrated in front of him. And then he said to his father that we will be this is the meaning of my dream from when I was a child. The 11 stars and the sun and the moon, meaning the 11 brothers and his father and mother all prostrated before him. That was the meaning. In those days it was permissible for them to prostrate. But then imagine this, Sayyidina Yusuf in this moment of glory, where after so many years of difficulty, being separated from his father, after all of these years, rather than being proud, he made a dua to Allah, because آتيتني من الملك وعلمتني من تأويل الأحاديث فاطر السماوات والأرض أنت ولي في الدنيا والآخرة توفني مسلما والحقني بالصالحين. Oh my Lord, you have given me kingdom and you have taught me the interpretation of dreams. O Creator of the skies and the earth, you are my protector in the world and the hereafter. Give me death as a Muslim and join me with the pious. Just like the Prophet ﷺ, humble in their time of glory. Sayyidina Sulaiman ﷺ, humble in their time of glory, so was Sayyidina Yusuf ﷺ. And the story goes on about what happened next, but what's most important from the whole story of Sayyidina Yusuf ﷺ, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the verse, فَإِنَّهُ مَن يَتَّقِ وَيَصْبِرْ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُضِيعُ أَجْرَ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. That he who adopts taqwa and remains patient, then Allah shall not let the rewards of those who do good go to waste. That is the summary of the whole story of Sayyidina Yusuf. Taqwa and patience. Despite the fitna around him, despite being seduced and pressured by so many people, he remained fearful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and refused to indulge in sin, and he lived a life of patience. Him and his father. So Allah says, إِنَّهُ مَن يَتَّقِ وَيَصْبِرْ. He who adopts taqwa and remains patient, what does Allah do? He never lets the rewards of those who do good go to waste. With this we completed Surah Yusuf. May Allah give us all the ability to understand. Many lessons to be learned from the story of Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi all at the time. Allah give us all the ability to understand. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا المرسلين ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار اغفر لنا ذنوبنا وإسرافنا في أمرنا وثبت أقدامنا وانصرنا على القوم الكافرين اللهم إنا نسألك من خير ما سألك من نبيك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم ونعوذ بك من شر ما استعاذك من نبيك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وأنت المستعان عليك البلاغ ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله وصلى الله وسلم